Well, with the 2026 budget proposal yet to be presented, we are joined by Dr. Emeka Okengwu. He's an economist. He will provide an economic deep dive into Nigeria's budgeting cycle and its growing discussions. Thank you so much for being on Newsnight.
Thank you very much.
I mean, to break it down for the viewers, how important is it when you hear lawmakers complain about overlapping budgets? We're running multiple budgets at the same time. What does that even mean?
Okay, why don't you just first give a definition to what a budget is?
Great, go ahead.
It's easily, you can define it easily as a financial plan that you have couched in figures. Mm-hmm. Now, having said that, you talked about the process of now getting a budget. There are three broad processes. The first one is that the MDAs, are given their envelopes to be able to fill. The second is that they now take it to the National Assembly, where is, called a budget proposal, and then after that the National Assembly does what it needs to do and it becomes a bill, and then it goes to the President where it becomes an act. Okay, so I want to simplify it.
Yes.
Now, this does not mean that because you have 54 trillion approved that you're going to be spending 54 trillion. This is important that people understand it. It means that that financial plan, okay, has a capital projection and outlay of 54 trillion that has to be found. And either you're going to be getting it, from maybe your deficit, which you're going to be borrowing, which is where your borrowing plan comes from, or you're going to be getting it from your taxes and internal sources. Now, the difference, the challenge usually is that what goes in is usually not what comes out. And where you have the MTF that has been done, FSP that has been done, after both and the bill, you find out that there is no system that now synthesizes what could have, either been lost or gained. So what you now do is that people now start struggling for cash backing. And it is in that process of cash backing that you now have the challenges you have. I think I've made that as elementary as possible. So having a budget does not mean you have 54 trillion or 54 billion or 28 billion to spend. Indeed.
And it is important that you highlighted the MTF because the MTF gives you a projection for 3 years, the maximum of 3 years for you to plan your spending. So why is it that when it now comes to each fiscal year, we still have the challenge when you have a projection, you have planned for 3 years. What's the essence of having an MTF when you can still stick to a fiscal year?
Well, because you see, what you have passed into law is the fiscal aspect, which runs a 12-month cycle. And this is why, even in talking about this now, I stand to be corrected, but I think there's been an infringement of our laws.
Like the lawmaker highlighted.
Oh, somebody said so?
Yes, the lawmaker from Anambra did say that the budget is a legal document, it's a legal instrument.
And nobody's calling anybody out. That's the first thing, because you cannot be talking about building something or nothing. Right now we are December, we are at the year end. And usually you find out that between the months of November and October, November and October, you now begin to do your budget, slowing down, doing your returns or whatever it is that is left. You're mopping up, as it were. Now, you haven't even spent one dime of this budget. Now, the law says what was passed as law, and I stand to be corrected. I do not also think that there's an act of the National Assembly not to implement the 2025 budget. I don't think so. If there's one existing, I'd like to see it. Because the same process that made it a law should have been the same process that can now also give it impetus or be able to now, kill it or rest it. Because what you now have is that we have just put a blanket over it, and then everybody's talking about the 2020. Yeah, that's what I saw you discussing. Oh, the MTF, has also been approved. The FSP has also been approved. Oh, the president is now going. Are you even making projections against the 2026 budget when you haven't settled even the 2024 budget, which is still running?
Now, the financial authorities, including the finance minister and the budget minister, saying they are now rolling over 70% of the capital project in the 2025 budget to the 2026. Is that justifiable? For the question you asked.
It is justifiable if it's done well. Okay, what you need to do rolling over has always been what it is. Remember that way back until we got into this one-year fiscal systems, you used to have, the 5-year rolling budget, which is the way it should be, especially the capital component. What you shouldn't roll over would be the recurrent, because that's where you pay your emolument salaries and everything. But the capital, in fact, it's not even right, in my opinion, to have capital budget running on an annual basis. Because most of the times, most of these projects will take 3, 4, 5 years, to get even to some point that is now become something that you can really evaluate. So the proper thing to do is that our budgeting system should be able to segregate and separate, the capital component, which you can now roll over, using this, midterm development planning, that the 2021 to 2026, 2026 to 2030, and then the Agenda 2050. Because if you now have that from 2021 or 2026, per se, to 2050, and you now look at all those capital components of your budget and begin to now plan what will take you 5 years, what will take you 6 years, what will take you this. So it's not a one-year thing. You don't capture it in a one-year program. You capture it as a rollover. So you put a 5-year plan against that project you have started in 2026 so that you don't need to keep coming back. What you now do is to evaluate and either, put more money or do the needful.
But what does that mean for contractors? What does that mean for road projects, rail projects, and the projects that do employ jobs?
Continuity, confidence. What it means is that you don't need to,
but we've seen contractors who have done jobs in the previous years and have still not been paid.
That's what I'm saying.
Because the monies have not been released because of these rollovers.
Well, what I'm trying to say is this: first and foremost, you have a project that's supposed to run for 5 years, and you have captured it in year 1. Now, the first struggle is to make certain that it gets into year 2, because 80% of the times it can get into that year 2 or the new year, and it's no longer in the budget. Now, what do? Now, the not paying is a different matter. I remember the government had come up with a policy to say, do not award any contract that is not cash backed. In fact, I think the office of the Minister of Finance had even come out to say that certificates were going to be issued, to ministries before they could award. Now, is that another legal infringement?
Is it?
I think it should be. If indeed certificates were issued and the monies were secured and then people have done jobs, and 80% of the times you don't do these jobs with your savings. Sometimes because of the volume, you need to borrow. Now, when you go to get this debt and throw into these, projects, now it's counting against you. All right. Right now, I think the total debt, local debt between 2024 to now is about 4 trillion. With 400 billion, with certificates issued and that can be paid. I mean, there's something really not right with that.
Well, there's something the lawmakers also highlighted, and as economists, I want you to also break that down for us. Lawmakers are saying that the government is still spending money from last year's plan, while already spending money from this year's plan and planning for next year. So they are spending from 2024, spending from 2025, and already planning on spending 2026.
Well, failure on their side. It shows that it's a failure of oversight. It's a failure of the functions of the National Assembly, because they are the only ones who have, the powers by law to be able to make certain that the right things are done.
So you think they are playing to the gallery?
I wouldn't want to use the word gallery, but I want to use the word, maybe they should be able to up their game, because it's not enough for you to, hold the press conferences and then, show your dismay. You should be able to clearly, because way back in those days, you used to have a lot of them go to this oversight, and then you have even the CDCU, the unit, the coordinating unit. They're supposed to be making certain that things are done well. So I think this is a failure of both process and oversight. So you don't blame only the executive, you also blame the legislator. You also blame the citizenry. Why do I say so? Because the essence of having CSOs and NGOs and CBOs is to start calling out government, at times like this. Now, this calls for better transparency and accountability. Now, if you are thinking, if we are saying, oh, you're still spending from 2023, then it simply means that you didn't rest that budget. You didn't close it. So what capital, what windows, what envelopes are you spending from? Is that not, again, some infringement? Because if it's a yearly budget and there is no law that rolls it over, then if you go to touch any money from that subhead, you have not committed, some kind of wrongdoing, as it were. So now you have the 2024 that is supposed to be ending. Okay, yes, you've rolled it over. Now, what you're rolling over, remember, is your capital.
Yeah.
And you're rolling over 70% of the capital. What that tells you is that only 30% of the capital was probably achieved. Now, that's also very poor for a country that is aiming and is hungry, for infrastructure development. And remember, that there's this plan to say that we need to spend close to about 300 billion or 3 trillion for us to be able to start getting close to where people can begin to look, into the country to show investment interest, because it's all about infrastructure. So if your infrastructure projects are tied to your capital, and in a full year, you're rolling over 70% of that component, then it calls a lot to question, really.
Indeed. And that's a good place to leave this conversation. Thank you so much, Dr. Emeka Okengwu, an economist, for sharing your thoughts.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.